Have you ever sat across from someone you care about, a partner, a close friend, a family member, who's asking what's wrong, their face full of concern and genuine desire to help, and felt your throat close up around words that won't come, your mind suddenly blank or spinning with thoughts too tangled to articulate, while you hear yourself say, "I'm fine," even though you're clearly, obviously not fine, and you watch their face shift from concern to frustration because you've done this again, you've locked them out again, you've chosen silence over connection again, even though some part of you desperately wants to let them in. Inside, it's not that you don't have feelings. You have so many they sometimes feel like they're drowning you. It's not that you don't want connection. You ache for someone to truly understand you. But there's something between what you feel and what you can say. Something that freezes the words before they form. Something that makes vulnerability feel less like intimacy and more like standing naked in front of a crowd waiting for judgment. When you try to access your feelings to share them, they become slippery, undefined, overwhelming, or they suddenly feel stupid, trivial, too much, not enough, certain to be misunderstood or dismissed. You wonder if you're emotionally stunted, if there's something fundamentally broken in you that makes emotional expression impossible. Why can everyone else seem to share their feelings effortlessly, while you're sitting there mute, trapped behind a wall you don't even remember building? Why does the thought of saying, "I'm hurt," or "I'm scared," or "I need help," feel more terrifying than just continuing to suffer silently? Why would you rather damage your relationships with distance than risk the exposure of honesty? But what if this isn't emotional incompetence? What if this isn't coldness or selfishness or inability to love? What if your silence around feelings is actually a sophisticated protection system, built over years in response to experiences that taught you emotional expression was dangerous, pointless, or led to outcomes worse than isolation? What if not sharing your feelings isn't withholding from others? It's protecting yourself from risks your nervous system learned long ago were too costly to take. When you consistently refuse to share your feelings, other people experience it as rejection, as distance, as a form of emotional unavailability that damages relationships and creates walls they can't penetrate. Partners feel shut out, unable to provide support or achieve intimacy. Friends feel like they don't really know you, like the relationship is superficial or one-sided. Family members feel hurt that you won't confide in them, interpreting your silence as lack of trust or affection. The assumptions they make are painful. You're emotionally closed off and incapable of intimacy. You don't trust them or value the relationship enough to be vulnerable. You're cold, stoic, or simply don't have the emotional depth others have. You're selfish, taking support from others, but never offering them access to your inner world. You're damaged and unwilling to do the work of healing or connection. You don't need anyone, which makes others feel unnecessary and rejected. These judgments come from people who genuinely want closer connection, but experience your emotional guardedness as a wall deliberately constructed to keep them out. But here's what they're not seeing. Your inability to share feelings isn't about them. It's about safety. Somewhere in your history, you learned that sharing feelings led to consequences worse than loneliness. Maybe your feelings were dismissed, minimized, or mocked. Maybe they were used against you later. Maybe they led to punishment, abandonment, or overwhelming responsibility for managing others' reactions. Maybe no one taught you the language to describe internal experience, so you literally don't have words for what you feel. Your silence isn't rejection of the people offering support. It's protection from outcomes your system learned to expect when you make yourself emotionally visible. You're not withholding intimacy, you're avoiding danger. From an evolutionary perspective, emotional expression served crucial social functions. It signaled needs, strengthened bonds, and facilitated cooperation essential for survival. But emotional expression also carried risks. It revealed vulnerability that could be exploited. It required trust that group members would respond supportively rather than harmfully. Throughout human history,
individuals who could accurately assess when emotional expression was safe versus dangerous had survival advantages. Neurologically, emotional awareness and expression involve complex brain systems. The insular and anterior cingulate cortex process internal bodily states and emotional awareness, interoception. The prefrontal cortex translates those sensations into language and regulates emotional expression. Childhood experiences literally shape these neural pathways. If your early environment was emotionally invalidating, unpredictable, or punishing, your brain developed different patterns. You might have heightened amygdala activity, hypervigilance to emotional threat, paired with reduced connectivity between emotional centers and language centers.
This means you feel emotions intensely, but can't easily translate them into words. Or you might have learned to suppress emotional awareness entirely, disconnecting from feelings as a protective mechanism. This relates to attachment theory. If your early caregivers were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or punishing of emotional needs, you likely developed avoidant attachment, learning that self-reliance is safer than vulnerability, that emotional needs are burdensome, that expressing feelings leads to rejection. This becomes an automatic response pattern. When emotions arise, your system automatically suppresses, minimizes, or intellectualizes them, rather than acknowledging and expressing them. This isn't conscious choice, it's conditioned survival strategy operating below conscious awareness. Your inability to share feelings is your nervous system protecting you based on what it learned was necessary for survival in your developmental environment. The roots of emotional silence almost always trace to childhood experiences where emotional expression proved unsafe or ineffective. Maybe you grew up with a parent who responded to your feelings with anger. "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." Maybe your emotions were dismissed. "You're being too sensitive," or "That's not a big deal." Maybe your feelings were used to manipulate you. "Look how upset you've made your mother." Maybe showing weakness led to bullying from siblings. Maybe your family simply never talked about feelings, operating on the unspoken rule that emotions were private matters to be handled independently. Or perhaps your emotions felt too big, too scary, and no adult helped you understand or regulate them, so you learned to lock them away because they felt dangerous. These experiences taught you that emotional expression doesn't lead to comfort, understanding, or support. It leads to rejection, punishment, dismissal, or burden. So you learned not to share. Over time, emotional suppression becomes automatic, a nervous system pattern rather than a conscious choice. When you start to feel something vulnerable, sadness, fear, need, your system immediately activates defenses. You intellectualize the feeling, dismiss it as invalid, distract yourself, or dissociate from it entirely. This happens so quickly, you might not even notice the feeling before it's gone. Your nervous system learned that emotional vulnerability triggers threat, based on past experiences where it did, so it protects you by shutting down emotional expression before it can emerge. The physical sensation of trying to express feelings, the throat closing, the mind going blank, the panic, isn't resistance or stubbornness. It's your autonomic nervous system activating a protective response it learned long ago was necessary for your safety. Cognitively, emotional silence often involves core beliefs about feelings and vulnerability. Emotions are weakness. Burdens should be carried alone. Needing others makes you pathetic. No one actually cares. Sharing feelings will make things worse. These beliefs create catastrophic predictions about what will happen if you're emotionally honest. You'll be rejected, mocked, abandoned, or you'll be forced into vulnerability that will be used against you. There's also often alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing your own emotions. You might feel physical sensations, tightness in your chest, exhaustion, irritation, without being able to name the underlying emotion. Without emotional literacy, sharing feelings becomes impossible, even when you want to.